I'm sure you've all felt it. The panic surging through your body when you realize that you have an assignment and not enough time to do it. Suddenly, a B on the assignment looks okay, and then a C, and then a D, and before you know it, you're in a downward spiral. And then you go to your friends and they're like, been there, done that. But why is this considered normal? Why is it normal for 20% of teens to be depressed before adulthood? Why is suicide a leading cause of death within kids our age? Well, a common answer is school. In fact, students report being more stressed out by schoolwork and tests than by any other thing in their lives. So Katie is more stressed out about why Edgar Allan Poe hates ravens so much, and not about why her boyfriend hasn't texted her back in 2 weeks. And looking at it, the answer as to why this is pretty obvious. For many students, education is a gateway out of poverty. For an upper class student, a B might just mean major disappointment. But for a lower class student, it could be the difference between receiving and not receiving a scholarship. And even then, good grades alone don't determine this. Students also need good extracurriculars, good essays, good SAT scores. And I think you can see how this stress piles up. And as Americans, we often scorn other school systems for being too harsh or too rigid. But are we really any different? For example, China has an exam called the Gaokao, which is a singular exam that can essentially direct where your future will go. But we have the SAT and the ACT. I mean, is it really that important that I don't know what a soliloquy is or what the quadratic formula is in the moment? Of course not. And for a lot of students, the American education system simply leaves them behind because the most core flaw within the system is that it's built to teach groups efficiently, but not groups effectively. So in the end, this mainly leaves lower income students behind. Take, for example, Don Loggins. Don Loggins was a lower income individual who grew up without running water or electricity. And so anytime she wanted water, she would have to buy it or go to a well to get it. And as a result, she was bullied for this. And even worse, in the later stages of her high school career, her parents abandoned her. No warning, nothing. They just left her without a house, without income, and she had to couch hop to avoid being homeless. At one point, she even had to be a custodian at the school that she goes to. But in the end, she got into Harvard. And to a lot of people, that might sound like a great tale of triumph and getting over adversity. But in reality, it's more of a testament to how much the system has failed individuals like Don Loggins. I mean, think about it. Most USC students don't have to worry about where their next meal is coming from, or if they're going to have a house, or if their parents are going to abandon them. So how is it fair to group us, students who typically have privilege, with students like Don Loggins, who at such a young age had to face near homelessness? That's right, it's not fair, and it makes no sense to group students with wildly different circumstances, all under one curriculum or one college application. And as Americans, we often tout our country as one of equal opportunity, but in terms of education, that couldn't be any more false. We fund the military with over $700 billion, but only a fraction of that goes towards education. So in the end, most schools are funded by property taxes. And naturally, in lower income areas where the property taxes are lower, the funding towards these schools are lower, and in the end, poorer students get a subpar education. And even further, many of these schools can't afford IB classes, can't afford AP classes, and can't afford extracurriculars. For example, a very common extracurricular done by USC students is debate. And while you might think that debate is cheap, there's a bunch of hidden fees attached. Each debate tournament is about $10. And then when you look into the most highly achieved debaters, most of them go to private schools, have private coaches, pay for their research studies, which can cost $80, and not many people can pay $80 for something that they may or may not use. And a more common extracurricular overall is sports. And even then, tournament fees add up, and then uniforms, and dues, and club fees. And in the end, your poor students are left with a fee that they cannot afford. And even more than that, many of these lower income families can't afford to have a child who isn't working. So instead of having extracurriculars, these kids have to work. And with activities like unpaid internships, they're lost time and money for families who can't afford those things. Furthermore, while some thrive under this system, the greatest injustice comes with college applications. But holistic applications, I hear you say, well, yes, holistic applications do help by evaluating a college application as a whole rather than its parts. We still have systems like legacy systems or prioritizing donations, and obviously that's not something a lot of lower income people have. For example, Don Loggins, her parents were probably not legacies of Harvard, and when the legacy system exists, that's essentially cycling through generations of already rich families and just giving them a spot, which inadvertently disadvantages lower income students. I mean, think about it. Just because Richard's dad and Richard's dad's dad went to a school, that makes Richard somehow more qualified than anybody else? Of course not. It just doesn't make any sense. And in the end, the system must change. It is unacceptable that we have such a level of inequity in the American education system, and it is unacceptable that students are sacrificing their mental health and their physical health to keep up with schoolwork and with extracurriculars and doing well on their college essays, all to make sure that they don't end up financially depressed when they're older. And while policies like holistic applications and FAFSA do help these students, they don't help as much as they should because the root of the problem is still there, which is the nature of the American education system from K through 12. So once we solve these practices, we'll finally be able to have policies like holistic applications help these lower income students. And in the end, as Americans, we should try to help students be truly able to pursue happiness. And we should abolish practices like the legacy system in order to achieve equity. So I ask you, please stand for the fight for education equality. Thank you.